Welcome to The Evil Within. Now, I have to say first and foremost that I am absolutely full of cold, so I don't sound my normal self and I apologise for that. However, you lovely folks all voted for the difficult achievement that you wanted me to grind for, and the clear winner was you asked for it for completing The Evil Within on the hardest difficulty, Akumu mode, in which any hit, no matter what, will kill you, as well as levels having more enemies and bosses scattered throughout them. However, we can't just grind that achievement, we still need them all. So today's video is the first in a three-part series for The Evil Within. Today's section is focused on collecting every achievement in the base game. The next video will focus on specifically Akumu mode, and then finally to end is the third part where we're going to cover all of the DLC. Now this is actually my first backlog of the channel, as I've played and completed this game many years ago, so we already have 26 of the achievements already ticked off. But don't worry, we still have plenty to go for and plenty to discuss. So let's get straight into it, clear the dust and start getting every achievement. Welcome to the Achievement Grind. So for the base game achievements, I first need to complete the entire game all the way through without upgrading Sebastian at all. Then, after that, play through the entire game again and try to complete the game within 5 hours. So, The Evil Within starts with officers arriving to a mental hospital as there are reports of a massacre inside. We play as Sebastian Castellanos, and walking through the front doors, they weren't kidding. The rooms are filled with corpses. We go to check out the CCTV to find out what happened and witness a hooded figure absolutely demolish a group of policemen, before he then breaks the cardinal rule of drugs and shares his needle with us. Absolutely disgusting. Although not as disgusting as where we wake up. When we regain consciousness, we are swinging by a meat hook with a sadist in front of us, and we don't like that, so when he walks away to butcher some meat, we break free, sneak up and grab some keys, then slip into the darkness. Well, I say slip into the darkness, I trip over the most obvious wire in the history of booby traps and alert the sadist to my great escape, and thus a chase begins. Within seconds though, the sadist catches us and gives us a lovely new addition to the back of my leg, before we throw ourselves down a grate and land in the forbidden jam. We hop our way throughout the level before then finding our first collectible. Now, in this playthrough as well, I'm going to be going for all of the collectibles as well, as there are a couple of achievements for those. We need to collect 151 documents and recordings, as well as 60 keys that can be used later on to get free ammo and gel from lockers. However, for now we continue hopping throughout the level until the sadist once again catches up to us. Now we have to use our brains and wits to distract him enough to silently sneak past him. And surprisingly, we do a cracking job. Well, that is until we get to the hallway and escape from him at the very last second through a lift. We then get off the lift and find ourselves back in the hospital, but something isn't right. When we go outside, the entire place is 2012ing us and buildings are collapsing and the ground is breaking below us. Just in the nick of time though, the policeman from the intro finds us in an ambulance and we hop on board. In the back of the ambulance is our friend Kidman, as well as a doctor from the hospital with one of his patients, Leslie. Introductions are made before the driver decides enough is enough and he transforms into a haunted. Before then, the ambulance is driven straight off a cliff. And that's chapter 1. So for those that don't know, this game is crazy, intense, and completely unhinged. So, let's continue. At the start of chapter 2, we awake to find ourselves inside a hospital ward with Tatiana, a cryptic and annoying nurse that helps us out throughout our journey. She introduces us to the chair upgrade, which for this playthrough we can't use, before she then shoos us back on our journey. Back in the ambulance, we wake up and escape before moving throughout the first level. Firstly, we meet the haunted policeman again and get to the opportunity to empty his head out of brain a little bit. This level is fairly straightforward, to be honest. We work our way through bit by bit, killing other haunted and gathering collectibles. Nothing too crazy to note here. However, on the way we do pick up our first achievement of the backlog, Silent Kill, by silently killing 5 enemies in a row with a knife. A little later on though, however, we see a horde of haunted all eyeing me up like a delicious treat. So we sprint across the bridge and mirror's edge our way into the water below. That's now chapter 2 done, and we're making wonderful progress. We walk through the building and find the doctor from the ambulance, Marcelo Jimenez. He is chasing after the patient Leslie and needs our help to get through the next section of the level. The level is swarmed with the haunted, some even have guns, so we must clear them all out and tackle the mini-boss in order to grab a tool that we need to advance. So that's exactly what we do. We kill our way through several haunted, also picking up the agony crossbow and the shotgun as additional weapons. Both are fantastic at what they do, and not before long we're ready to fight the first boss. First though, I do accidentally kill a pig. Rest in peace, crispy bacon, you will be sorely missed. Now, the sadist from the first level does not appreciate the fact that I killed his friend, and comes to enact some revenge. Unfortunately for him though, he is a moron. He sets himself on fire and literally kills himself, which is fantastic as now we can steal his chainsaw and somehow use it to break this thick ass chain to access the next section. And the chainsaw breaking the chain is probably the most unrealistic aspect of the game, by the way. I'm calling it out. However, by doing that, we're already on chapter 4. At the start of the level, it's more of the same. We meet up with Dr. Jimenez again and explore thoroughly for ammo and collectibles. However, moments later, we find the Doctor's brother Valerio. He, of course, has become infested, so this is a difficult moment as we quietly and respectfully handle the situation. Rest in peace, friend. In the basement, however, is where we then find Leslie again, and the Doctor then tries to calm him down before something then enters the room and Seb's spidey sense goes off. Turns out these fuckers can be invisible now as well, which is fantastic. We actually embarrass this haunted before we move on. I say move on because when we leave, Ruvik then appears, the hooded person from the beginning of the game. Since Sebastian also has a death wish, he chases down after Ruvik before we get Shining elevated into a new room full of blood and bodies. Ruvik appears once again and this time uses an ungodly amount of ants to animate all of the corpses in the room. But he doesn't know who he's dealing with, so we quickly dispatch the haunted that dare tried to take me on and carry through the level. This is then where we meet Laura. I forgot Laura existed, and she is the creepiest and most awesomely designed creature in the game in my opinion. However, she is severely allergic to fire, so we use that against her rather well before then making our escape, by once again having a luckily placed lift to save our life. Well, I say that in the next section we are then immediately chased down by Ruvik, and when he can't get us, he breaks the entire support of the stairs and plummets us down straight into the next chapter. The start of this level has us work through rooms and rooms of more of the invisible haunted. This section wasn't too bad at all, just wait for them to move objects and once they do, tear them to shreds. In the next room we then find Joseph. Bloody Joseph. We find him in a bath filled with questionable liquid before we rescue him and have a buddy to aid us in our endeavours. Now, I'm going to admit it, Joseph is absolutely useless. He runs away from enemies, he doesn't fire, and he leaves all of the hordes for us to deal with. However, Joseph does have a function, to disarm these random bomb doors, so I guess he isn't totally useless. In the next section, we burst into a room to find Kidman in a saw trap. That is filling up with water. Me and Joseph then have to deal with wave upon wave of enemies until we beat enough to save Kidman. Now, there's actually an achievement tied to this section. We have to kill every enemy and save Kidman without Joseph taking a single hit of damage. And from what we established earlier, that's going to be a nightmare as he is a moron. So the horde arrives and we slowly took out every single one. We kill enough before we sprint to the dial to free Kidman from Billy's trap. And I don't know how I managed this at all, but we did it on the first try. Joseph didn't take a single hit thankfully, and somehow managed to grab not a part of the job description achievement. While I was busy celebrating though, Joseph and Kidman then fall through the floor and we chuck ourselves down in pursuit. We find them in a room killing enemies and continue before Laura then makes herself known again and snatches us all up from the floor. It's now time for our first proper boss battle. We end up in a room that is filled with bodies and furnaces, and here we have to use Laura's fire allergy against her by repeatedly setting her on fire, whilst also avoiding her attacks as they are more or less an insta-kill. She gets the better of us a couple of times, I will admit, and pounds my brain into a fine paste, but eventually we get the better of her and explode her to her death. Easy peasy. In the next room though, we see a flashback of Ruvik talking to Leslie in a bath, with Ruvik feeling very happy that he might have found a great subject to experiment on. The room then turns into a brain before then exploding into finishing this chapter. Now we start in chapter 6, and my god, we hate chapter 6. We find Joseph again before we then are stopped by a bomb door. So we must defend Joseph again in this tiny room against waves of the haunted so that he can actually open it. We clear the first room in the basement and have to do it all over again. Now unfortunately for us, I spent my childhood playing zombies, so I knew how to train your zombie. So by running in circles, we wasted enough time for Joseph to open the door and into the next section. Here we are given the sniper rifle, a personal favourite of mine, and to progress we need to shoot down 4 boxes filled with harpoon minigun users. Now this section wasn't that bad honestly. In fact, we actually picked up our next achievement by helping Joseph back up on his feet when he takes a tumble on the bridge, earning us everyone gets 1. 4 headshots later we then yet have another sadist to face, and honestly with our new weapons and fast as fuck movement we take him out easily and move on. However, it appears that Joseph is infected and he has been having these unhinged moments where the infection gets the better of him. However, lying ahead, a git gets executed and Joseph now feels like a hero. However, this makes him trip a wire that blows up the bridge and gets him kidnapped. With a couple of expert bullets however though, we once again saved his stupid life, even though I don't want to, and we move on. We then get a short sequence where we fight through a couple of enemies with Joseph sniping them from additional help, and we face 2 more mini-bosses, Noon and Zen. God, I hope I'm pronouncing those right. These 2 are guardians of the church, which is where we saw Leslie run. Now, honestly, again, these guys were both easy as hell to kill, and once again, we just kept moving on. Without a clear path ahead though, we have to head down below the church and make our way through the underground, before then coming across a wonderful and fluffy boyo. He's in a cage, so we surely don't have to worry about him. Well, wrong, as when we go to leave, this fluffy boy makes his presence known and chucks us into the next boss fight just outside of the church. Now, of course, Joseph got knocked unconscious here, so it's up to us to put the puppy down. Again, a fairly easy kill to be honest. A couple of bolts and a couple of sniper bullets to the heart tends to do the trick, before Joseph then regains consciousness and we head to the church. Oh, but wait, because Joseph isn't annoying enough, he pulls a real Velma and loses his glasses. He then says, "Oh my god, I can't see without my glasses, be a dear and go and get them," and then instead of rightly telling him to get fucked, we go back into the belly of the beast, grab his stupid spectacles and reunite them with Joseph. We then enter the church and that is chapter 6 finished. Good riddance. Chapter 7 starts with Joseph having another episode of being feral, and before we can get a lid on it, Ruvik decides to show his amazing seer impression and make everything in the room, including ourselves, all floaty. We then get thrown into a new K system and we must travel on. In here we get our first look at the Keeper, who breaks a lock and seals a door on top of him, but we need to go through there as that's where we go to get Leslie. So to do so, we need to find 3 stone tiles to complete a puzzle and open the door. Now, these aren't difficult to find, we've already got the first one and just have to go through 2 simple rooms to basically find the others. Also dealing with a few new enemies, these 2-headed haunted. They're basically normal haunted with a little bit more health, so they are easily taken out. However, we find the rest of the pieces and pursue the safe brain. Moving on, we then find the Keeper again, who traps a hallway with death and introduces us to a new mine that traps us in barbed wire. Easy enough to get out of though, so we sprint whilst avoiding the death spikes and additional mines before then finding Leslie in a cage. We free him, open up a door for him before the selfish prick just leaves us behind. Bit rude, but not as rude as the Keeper appearing to try and cleave my head off. And here is the next boss fight. In this we need to turn valves of the deadly gas off whilst also taking out the Keeper that chases us. Now the special thing about this gent is that once he's been killed he can respawn by teleporting to another safe on the floor, and there is an achievement in this section to only kill him twice. So with that up for grabs, we get to work. Now we work our way through the rooms, avoiding him whilst we can and killing him twice, but since we're doing too well he decides to sabotage a valve to the exit, so now we need to grab a new one. So we find the valve, freeze the Keeper in place and sprint to the valve to turn it off in time, and with only a moment to spare it works. We turn off the valve and sprint to the exit. A safe box then decides to take inspiration from Alien and tries to face hug us, but Seb's favourite film is Alien, so he throws the safe under some spikes, brings it down on the Keeper and takes him out once and for all. Well, kind of. It is then a short jog to the end of the level and we finish the chapter as well as gain the achievement Don't Have Time for This. So at the beginning of chapter 8 I go for another chapter specific achievement, and it sounded a little bit tricky. We have to go through the entire chapter without firing a single shot. It's melee only here I'm afraid, and I'll be honest, it sounds much harder than it actually is. This chapter's fairly short and there are ways to deal with each section. Like here at the start we have to deal with a group of enemies, but we don't actually have to, as if we farm them all into the first room we can actually open the door very easily without ever having to fight. Whilst opening the next door though, we get rained on by very small enemies. That confused the hell out of me, but we can just ignore them, and even if we don't, we can just hit them for a quick insta-kill. We then have to place a block on this door to open it, which we do easily, and within minutes we are in a room with Jimenez again. Here he tells us that he and Ruvik were working on a method to link brains together, sharing emotion, memory and whatnot directly. It turns out that Ruvik is currently the host of this nightmare, and even though other characters have influence on it, Ruvik is in charge and he is the one with all the influence. We go to move on before another big weird puppy chases us down. We sprint away through the door that leads us back into the safe room. Ruvik then appears once more, and that's mission 8 completed. We then gain the achievement Item Management. Now straight into chapter 9, I was feeling good. We were getting the spare achievements and the collectibles wonderfully and making great time. We start this chapter outside of a manor. As we walk in we see Leslie and Jimenez go through a big ass door that once again we need to open. Now to open the door it's fairly simple but odd. We have to find 3 heads around the mansion and probe a certain part of the brain to open the door with a blood donation, or something like that. The game is very unhinged. Now again, this mansion is fairly easy as the only real threat comes from Ruvik invading, who can insta-kill you, but he is quite easy to loop until he just naturally disappears anyway. So one by one we probe the brains until we have the door open. We walk through to see a young Ruvik dissecting the head of a pig, as you do. He then transforms into a trail of ants and then we follow to the next section, where the ants then combine into a giant creature that we can simply outrun for now. In the next part, we have to sprint through a maze surrounded by creepy ass mannequin heads whilst also avoiding Ant-Man, until we end up in a field of sunflowers? Lovely. But once we enter the barn there, we get some more lore. In here we can actually see a young Ruvik and a young Laura playing games. Now it turns out that they're actually brother and sister, which is nice. But what isn't nice is that Ruvik is also in love with Laura. Ew. However, during these flashbacks we can see farmers start to burn down the barn. They didn't know, or should I say didn't care, that Ruvik and Laura were inside. So when they set the barn alight, it kills Laura and gives her the allergy to fire, as well as horrifically disfiguring Ruvik. Ruvik's dad then locks him inside a basement inside of the family manor until eventually Ruvik breaks out and kills both of the parents, also claiming their massive fortune. With the money, Ruvik then began donating to Beacon Memorial Hospital in exchange for test subjects. As we go to leave the burning barn though, Ant-Man makes his last appearance. He summons Haunted to kill us. It doesn't really work as we're simply built different, but moments later Ant-Man finds Laura's flashback corpse, picks it up and vanishes, before the roof then caves in on us and we are back at the mansion. We sprint through and complete the level. Now we start chapter 10. It starts with us once again working our way through the level, killing Haunted and avoiding a giant bladed merry-go-round, cause yep, that's a thing. We do just that and find ourselves in another room. This time we then have to work our way through the level, avoiding traps and enemies so that we can turn the power back on and open the main door. Going through again, fairly easy, we turn on the power and start to make our way back until we meet a new mini-boss type enemy known as Trauma. These things are a bit tricky to kill as they are a complete bullet sponge, but nothing that we can't handle. We make our way back to the main room and open the doors, and now we get to a boss fight. Here we meet Laura again, who very unwisely decides to have her fight in a furnace where tons of fire exists. How stupid. We get chased bit by bit until we enter the room that we can kill her in. I say can because for this boss fight you don't actually have to kill her. You can keep her at bay and turn off the fire to the exit, but for this we have to kill her for an achievement. We also have to kill her as there is a collectible in the next room ahead that you cannot access unless you do kill her. Now this may not sound like a problem, but this was a huge one. We didn't have the ammo or the matches to kill her. We tried several times and always ran out of ammo before she was dead, and this left me extremely confused as what to do. As if I ignore her, I lose 2 achievements that would make future playthroughs a nightmare, but then somebody in my chat told me a method that would work wonderfully. But it is a bit cheap, I won't lie. Around the level there are these levers that if you shoot them will spit fire out for a couple of seconds to burn Laura. However, if you shoot the bottom of the pipe with a harpoon, it will endlessly spit out fire. That will burn Laura over and over again. Well, until she dies. And even though I didn't love this idea, I had to use it or I would be severely behind my playthrough and achievements. So we shot the pipe, burnt Laura to death, and gained the achievement Bathed in Flames, as well as the sodding collectible. We hop in the lift and are greeted with Ruvik again, who threatens us a little bit more before leaving. We exit the lift back into the manor and sprint through the door once more. Here we find Jimenez again performing an experiment with Leslie. He says that Leslie has been here before and survived, so being the only patient to ever do that, he must be our key out of this hellhole. But before the experiment kicks in fully, the puppy that chased us down before appears again before then stomping Jimenez into the afterlife. And just like that, we already have yet another boss fight, this time taking on what is called as the Amalgam Alpha. Now, he may look scary, but honestly this is the easiest boss in the game. We damage him slightly until he falls over and emits a purple light. From that light, an eye then spawns. So we snipe the eye, put a couple more shots in, and then it dies. Simple. We enter a lift that spawns, and then that's chapter 10. We then exit the lift and spawn in the city. And you'll be surprised to know that we start by just working our way through the level, killing enemies and making our way through the city. Nothing really needs mentioning here other than the fact that we get the Magnum pistol, which is just simply broken and overpowered to hell. One thing worth noting as well is the new enemy type, a Ruvik clone, that can summon Laura's arms to come and grab you. But again, fairly easy to kill. We also meet Shigyo, an aquatic beast that will insta-kill you if it grabs you in the water, but by using bodies as bait, it's fairly easy to avoid. We fight through the level until we reach a gondola. This part has us being a sitting duck whilst enemies spawn and shoot you from the sides, but since one bullet knocks them to the death, this part was also fairly easy to tackle. We then meet Kidman again, who is trapped after being chased by the Haunted. We of course, being the hero that we are, go to save her. Now Kidman is what we call a good companion, as she doesn't have a health bar to worry about and she actually shoots the enemies. Now unfortunately moments later we start to get headaches. Now the headaches are the exact same that Joseph was getting and it makes us go feral, so Kidman shoots me. Somehow I wake up and Kidman has trapped me and ran off. However, Leslie is now here to save me and turn the tables. He opens a door for us, well, mostly, and we find ourselves in a warehouse filled with flammable gas. So we must go through this next section without firing our gun. Again, I'm sorry to say, fairly easily, and we finally find the keycard and exit the warehouse, where we find Joseph, who has managed to commandeer a bus. And with that, this chapter's over too. Now, chapter 12 is probably the easiest yet. It starts with me and Joseph on the bus before Kidman barges in and gets us straight into speeding. It turns out that she has a great reason to do so though, as chasing us is Heresy, a huge spider-like behemoth that wants us dead. He rips off the top of the bus and goes to kill us. But since I've got my Magnum, he's pretty easy to take out, falls off and begins to chase us once again. Before he can get us though, he drifts into a building that blocks us off, but gives us a great chance to be ambushed by Haunted with bombs and rifles. Now, since this part just chucks ammo at you, again, it's easy, and all you have to do is waste enough time until Joseph kills a Haunted in front of the bus with a bomb that clears the path for us to continue. And of course, once we get some traction, Heresy rejoins the Xbox Live party chat and decides to try to kill us again. It doesn't work thankfully, but he is moments away from killing me before a well-placed bridge turns him into the world's most disgusting paste. Heresy is done for. But on the way back to the hospital, Joseph, like the useless fuck he is shot and injured, and now we have to make our way to an ambulance to get some anti-bullet medicine so that he lives. However much I don't think we should actually do that and just move on, let him die anyway, I'm reminded, I'm the hero. That is what heroes do. We find the bullet bandages, and on the way back to the bus we are greeted with a minigun. Now, we're supposed to be scared of this, however, I want my hands on that gun. We commandeer his truck, grab the gun and simply unload it into a horde of enemies. Now this part made me very happy and it was very therapeutic. But soon the waves end and we're back on the bus. Now it's time for our next achievement. This one has us take control of the bus and make it to the end of the level without hitting a single Haunted. Honestly, this was fairly easy as there aren't that many on the bridge to begin with. So moments later, we unlocked not a scratch on her, before then Ruvik once again appears and throws the bus into the side of a building, ending chapter 12. Now we don't have that many left, so let's carry on. The mission starts with me and Joseph looking out the skyscraper that we crashed into, noticing that ahead there is a train that we can use as a bridge to make it back to Beacon Hospital. And like a couple of morons that we are, we decide that that train bridge is a great idea and set off to cross it. Not actually thinking, wait, no, that's a horrendous idea and that will get us killed. Now again, honestly, there isn't much to say about this level, besides the Keeper returning, a new acid trap, as well as the death Roombas. There honestly isn't anything to note in this mission and it's just more of the same. We fight through the level, killing enemies, avoiding death. Eventually though, we do get into a freezer where Joseph runs the Keeper into, and now we have to fight the Keeper again until the door to the food lift opens and we can make our escape. We do just that, hop in and escape the Keeper again. Within moments though, we are outside of a playground and Kidman is walking up to it with Leslie. But as Leslie goes to enjoy the swings, Kidman pulls out a gun and goes to kill him. We threaten her to stop, but she says that Ruvik wants Leslie and that she has orders not to let Ruvik get Leslie under any circumstances. So when she goes to shoot, Joseph goes to take the bullet. But Leslie screams and an earthquake shatters the level. Leslie then runs away and Joseph takes another bullet for his troubles. And that is the last we'll see of him, for now. And we reach the end of the chapter. At the start of chapter 14, we are now in a train station, and like several missions that came before, we work our way through the level, kicking names and taking ass. But eventually we come across a gross web of goo. We burn it and head down into the substation. However, as we continue to kill enemies and dodge the new electricity traps, a new friend introduces themselves by joining in on the killing. Sod it, could be worse. We carry on making our way through the level until we find a lift and an electric puzzle. We quickly solve it and go back to turn the lever on for full power before Quell then makes his appearance. This creature throws us into a pit and another boss fight ensues. Quell can do several things: slither around, go invisible, jump into pipes to then release maggots that explode on hitting us. It is a fairly fun and interesting fight, but like the ones that came before it, a couple of freeze bolts and a couple of well-placed grenades take this thing out once and for all. On the way out of the building after powering the lift, we also find the last key, just sitting there waiting for us. We then find the bridge train, and after it threatens us, Ruvik appears. As we sprint to make the jump, we jump, end back in the corridor to the brain room that came before. We get more backstory on Jimenez betraying Ruvik before the brain once again explodes, and with that, we are on our final mission. In the 15th and final mission, our first task is to use the last of the keys to open up all of the lockers in the safe room, and once we do, we unlock the achievement Master of Unlocking. As we go to leave, Leslie finds us again and asks us to follow him. We do, and within seconds we find ourselves at the door of the Beacon Mental Hospital again. We enter and go through the level, backtracking to areas from the first mission. We push through and find ourselves at the base of a lighthouse though. Upon climbing it, we hop in a lift and then carry on going through the level, until Ruvik once again appears to try to end us. We instead set him on fire by smashing a lantern over his head, and as punishment he sends us to the Realm of Eyes. Here we have to face wave and wave of enemies. This part again just throws ammo at you, so it is fairly easy to complete. Eventually a rocket launcher wielding sadist appears and opens the door to the next part. We finish destroying everything in this room and sniping those in the next, before we then find ourselves in a brand new room, trapped with 2 keepers inside, and we need them both dead to move on. Now this part did take me a little bit, as they do become absolute bullet sponges, and I was truly tested to get through this next section, but thankfully we did beat them eventually, and a door appeared to the next place. We enter it and go through this bizarre spotlight maze section, which again is fairly easy to figure out, but since Ruvik is a cheating scumbag, when we do well he sends a shredder after us and we sprint through the door that eventually leads to STEM. In there we look through the floor to see that Sebastian is in a bath of milk asleep, before Leslie then disrupts the reunion by screaming that Kidman is chasing him. We hold our ground as Kidman tries to reason with me. We tell her to get stuffed, but before we can do anything the room changes and explodes. We go tumbling out of the window and Kratos our way down onto a big brain. And just like that, it's time for the final boss fight himself, Ruvik. Now, he has taken control of a horrible beast, but the fight itself is more or less just a couple of quick time events that string along. First, we get flung into a cart and machine gun our way through his hands and brain. When he gets bored of that, he then hits us onto a spike of barbed wire, where we then access a rocket launcher from a dead sadist that we then rattle him up a little bit with. He doesn't appreciate this either, and we fall back onto the brain for the final showdown. As Ruvik's beast comes in to munch on us, we fire a single bullet straight into Ruvik's head, and with that, Ruvik dies, and the monster explodes. We wake up in the milk tub, detach the wire to our brain and go to end this by taking Ruvik's host brain and giving it a well-deserved squish. We exit the room, step outside, see Leslie run into the distance, and that is the evil within. We end the game and get the achievement "It is what it is" for completing the game without spending a single blob of gel. But we're not done. We now have to complete the entire game again in under 5 hours, get the last collectible that is only accessed in New Game Plus, and spend all of the gel that we'd gathered to fully upgrade Sebastian. As even though we didn't spend any in the previous playthrough, we had saved tons that we can now spend in New Game Plus, as well as get a couple more miscellaneous achievements. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire game again, don't worry, but the one thing that I will say is by starting New Game Plus, we actually unlock the RPG as a weapon that simply destroys enemies and bosses. So this should be easier. That and the fact that I know where to go, what to do, and we can upgrade Sebastian now to his ultimate form. The next achievement we get is by picking up the last missing person poster in the save room, unlocking the achievement every nook and cranny, which was actually a great relief as I was terrified that I'd missed a collectible along the way. Then hopping in the chair, we then fully upgrade all of Sebastian's abilities for the achievement hard body. We got the power of 3 for fully upgrading 3 weapons, as well as upgrading all weapons for unstoppable arsenal, before finally upgrading all of Sebastian's ability to hold ammo for the achievement "Why can't I hold all this ammo?" But now it's back to the speedrun. We expertly sprint through chapter by chapter, thankfully making little mistakes, and thanks to our new weapons and upgrades, making jam out of any of the enemies that dared stand in our way. We pace through them all bit by bit before we find ourselves once again at the final boss. We shoot him in the head. Now all we needed to see if it was under 5 hours. And then quickly soon after, the quick and the dead popped, as it only took us 3 hours and 41 minutes to go through the entire game. With that, we only had one more achievement to go, to kill 5 enemies with every type of agony bolt. Now the harpoon, the explosive and the freeze bolt were quite easy to do since they killed on command, whereas the shock and the light bolt are different because you have to kill the enemies whilst they're currently being shocked or blinded. But I thought the perfect time to do this would be at the beginning of the game at the very first horde. So I loaded in, got their attention, blinded them all before quickly blowing them up with the rocket launcher, and with that we have our final achievement for this run, Full House. And folks, that's it for now. We still have to tackle Akumu mode for its related achievements and then all of the DLC, but we are done with the base game for now. On the whole, I loved Evil Within. Some parts were a little bit tedious, but this game is fantastic and has a really good blend of action and horror. However, I'm going to be saving the stats and analysis for when I fully complete the game in a couple of weeks' time. However, for next week's video, we are visiting Arcane Studios again. Make sure to come back next Sunday as we tackle the very highly requested game, Deathloop, a new game made by Arcane that apparently is set in the same universe as Dishonored. So, how will it fare? Come back next Sunday to find out. And thank you all so much again for watching. Don't worry, the Akumu mode playthrough will be happening very soon, but thank you all so much for the incredible support. I'm still very much overwhelmed by all of this, and I cannot wait to bring you more content. But for now, thank you all again. Take care. Bye bye for now.